Good evening, my name is Alberto Mateos. I am going to make a presentation about the roles of learners in the language class. The content of the presentation is number 1, the roles of learners in ELT. Number 2, the learner's responsibility in learning. Number 3, how can learners adopt different roles? Then we are going to look at the reflective attitudes on learners. Next, the independent learning. And finally, the complementary roles of teachers. First, let's look at the definition. Role refers to the part that learners and teachers are expected to play in carrying out tasks, as well as the social and interpersonal relationships between the participants. In this chart, we have different roles for learners in ELT. In the first column, we have different approaches to language teaching, from oral situational to number 8, Suggestopedia. Each approach has a different role for learners. For example, in oral situational, learners listen to teachers and repeats. He has no control over content. In number 3, communicative, the learner has an active role. He contributes and receives. Now, about learner responsibility in learning. We have 3 categories for the role of learners. Learners as a passive role. He has no control over content or methods. When the learner is a listener and performer, he has little control over the content of learning. The learner is able of giving as well of taking. The third role is the learner is responsible for his or her own learning. The learner is involved in a process of personal growth, and the learner develops autonomy and skills. Now, how can learners adopt different roles? As a teachers, we know that learners need to be adaptable, creative, inventive, and independent. As a teachers, we can help learners to discover ways of learning what works best for them. We can also teach learners ways to organize what they have learned and more activities. About reflective attitudes on learners, how to promote them? Well, here we have 4 activities based on spelling. In a spelling activity, we can, as a teacher, we can make learners to guess which letter or words begins with by listening to similar words. We can have learners make the word into syllables for clues. Learners can use rhyming words to know how to spell a new word, or they can use a dictionary. Now, about self-instructions or how to promote independent learning. There are different reasons to promote independent learning. One of them is practical reasons. In some situations, it's impossible for learners to attend regular classes, so self-instructions is an answer. Individual differences. Self-instructions enables us as a teacher to cope with differences in aptitude, cognitive styles, and strategies. Educational aims. Self-instructions facilitates the development of strategies, which promotes autonomy and fulfills requirements for continuing education. Motivation. Self-instructions can have a positive effect on motivation. Learning how to learn, it's also a way to promote self-instruction. Now, finally, about the complementary roles of teachers. The teacher roles are related to the functions they are expected to fulfill. Teachers can function as directors, as facilitators, or as a guide. The degree of control the teacher has over learning also explains the roles of the teacher. The role of the teacher is also defined by the degree to which the teacher is responsible for content. Finally, the interactional patterns that develop between teachers and learners define the role of teachers and learners. Well, thank you for attending my presentation.